call to order the February 4th Seabrook City Council meeting at 6 p.m. Please rise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Yeah, it does. I think I'm sorry.
Okay, item 1.1, public comments. Nobody signed up. Thank you. We'll move on. 2.0 presentation. 2.1 presentation of a proclamation to Bay Area Turning Point proclaiming the month of February 2025 as Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. Is anybody here from, please come up.
Skip G.
Whereas Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month calls attention to the fact that teen dating violence is widespread and impacts every person in this community. And whereas teen dating violence harms our children and community, and statistics show 1.5 million teens will experience physical abuse from a dating partner each year. And whereas 1 in 5 women and 1 in 7 men who experienced rape, physical violence, and stalking by an intimate partner first experienced some form of partner violence between the ages of 11 and 17. Whereas young people experience heightened rates of sexual violence, and youths aged 12 through 17 are 2.5 times as likely to be victims of rape or sexual assault. Whereas 10 Texas teens were killed by the dating partner in the year 2023, the youngest being 15 years, with 3 residing in Harris County. And whereas we must work together to educate our community about teen dating violence prevention, supporting survivors, and speaking out against harmful attitudes and actions. Whereas prevention is possible when everyone gets involved. The first step is increasing education, awareness, and community involvement. It's time for us all to take action to create change for the future and safer environment for all. Now, therefore, in recognition of the important work done by domestic violence programs, I, Tom Kolevsky, Mayor of Seabrook, do hereby proclaim the month of February as Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month and urge all citizens to actively participate in the scheduled activities and programs sponsored by the Bay Area Turning Point to work toward the elimination of teen dating violence. I thank you. You want to say anything?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd like to get a picture if we can.
I'd like to thank you all for having us this evening and presenting us this proclamation. Y'all have been valued community partners of ours for several years now, and y'all always give me these proclamations about 3 times a year. But what he was saying, these statistics are very alarming in how many people are experiencing teen dating violence and the impacts it has into adulthood. So we do encourage everybody to get involved with Bay Area Turning Point, some of the efforts that we are putting forth. We are working on creating a pilot community-based prevention program that will include the Clear Lake areas, League City, Webster, Seabrook, and Kemah. So you can find out more information on our website and on our social media pages. Thank you.
You want a picture?
Yes, please.
Hold on. Get this up. Oops. Take your picture. Ready?
Thank you all so much.
Okay, we have one more proclamation, 2.2. Presentation of a proclamation celebrating 20 years of service to the city of Seabrook by the Bay Area Houston Alumni Chapter of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority. No, that's you. Okay, great. Okay, let me read it. Got to get my glasses. They write these too small. Whereas Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated was founded by 22 focused women attending Howard University in 1913. And whereas the sorority was founded to encourage academic achievement and conduct various community service activities and organization whose purpose is to provide and support local communities through established programs. And whereas the Bay Area Houston Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority celebrates its 20th anniversary on February 26, 2025. And whereas the chapter is celebrating 2 decades of support to the city of Seabrook and surrounding communities through donations, volunteerism, and impactful initiatives, enriching lives and fostering positive change for those in need. Now, therefore, I, Tom Kolupski, Mayor of Seabrook, designate February 26, 25 as the Bay Area Houston Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated 20th Anniversary Commemoration Day in the city of Seabrook. Thank you. You want to tell us a little bit about what you do so people understand?
Good evening and thank you. So we have had community partnerships, do things like clothing drives. Some years ago, we worked with a sheriff that did some community outreach out here as well. Our chapter service area covers Seabrook, Pearland, Clear Lake, Friendswood, and Webster. So we just really want to continue to support all of those areas and continue to do great work in the city. So we're just excited and we thank you all for giving us this opportunity, giving us this proclamation, and allowing us to be here this evening.
Thank you very much.
Yes, please. Take a picture.
Of course, you're taller, it'll probably come out better.
I don't know. Sometimes it hurts.
This one,
She can click hers. She hears the Kansas.
Okay, before we move on, I skipped 1.1. Mayor and city council and or members of city staff may make announcements about city community events. Rob?
You may have heard some of this before. Coffee with a Cop is coming up on Friday, February 28th, 9:30 to 11 a.m. That's at Damn Fine Coffee and Fried Pies. You should stop by there beforehand, sample their coffee and fried pies, just to further encourage you to go to that. Last day to apply for a place on the ballot for the general election is Friday, February 14th, right here at City Hall. And last day to apply for a place on the ballot of a special election is Monday, March 3rd, again, right here at City Hall. For more information, you can go to seabrooktx.gov/elections. It'll show you who's running, everything else you need to know. Is there anything I've missed?
Is there anybody else? Anything? Thanks, Rob. 2.3, presentation of the quarterly update for the Seabrook Volunteer Fire Department. Nathan.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. First and foremost, I would like to reintroduce Assistant Chief Aaron Bristow. Thank you for coming here and supporting me again. I always ask these guys to come and support me in case I get nervous and forget something. I can look over there. And Theo Presswood, please stand up. If y'all don't know, he is a station captain. The Presswood family has been in Seabrook probably, well, at least your entire life, if not longer than that. And your mother to this day still lives in.
And 2 sisters live here and my brother.
The whole thing. And he joined the fire. We actually went to high school together, and we met joining the fire department in April of 1987. That's how we became friends. So thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
I don't know if there is I can't think of what it's called, PowerPoint or anything like that. We submitted our annual statistics. but I can tell you what they are just off the top of my head and my notes. So for 2024, we ran 1,047 calls for service in Seabrook. And adding on to that, about 66% of those calls are first responder calls. And then it flakes down from there for fire calls and service calls and boat calls. Continuing with the statistics, 103 calls were ran in El Lago. 1 call was designated in Harris County, which would be like your Port Road or Bay Area, where we were probably called over there. 51 calls for service for mutual aid. That's where we leave the city limits or leave our jurisdiction and go to Kemah, Nassau Bay, Webster, these days Deer Park, and we went to the Shell Pemex incident. And 27 calls for service in the waterway. The waterway, as you know, is really funny. Right there is Chambers County, and then right there is Galveston County. So we just designate that as waterway. So that's a grand total of 1,229 calls for service. A couple other notes that I've told you about before that I wanted to start statting in 2024, just because I think it's very important that y'all know how we support the Seabrook EMS. We documented 26 times that we put somebody in the back of the ambulance. And those scenarios are when the paramedics in there say, hey, we can use your help, and one of our medics gets back and actually goes to the hospital with them. And then 16 times we drove the ambulance. So that call is so critical. We put one of our medics to drive the unit, so both of the highly skilled paramedics can be in the back and work the patient. So I think those are noteworthy achievements that the volunteer fire department does to assist the Seabrook EMS. Okay. The next topic I've been avoiding for an entire year and have zero desire to talk about. So for me and for you listening in the audience, those of you who are running for city council, you may decide to take your name off the ballot once you hear this type of topic. I will try to be very basic. I'll try to be short, because this could take an entire workshop to discuss the in-depths of it. My guess is that very few of you, except for the exception of Gail and me and some of the city employees at Public Works and Sean, know about what the ISO rating is for our city. Some of you are shaking your head. You might have some knowledge of what that is. And again, I want to keep it very basic. I want to say that I've learned this by being in the fire service. It's nothing I have a desire to do or be a part of at all. As you can imagine, there are experts who make a living doing this. You could hire a consultant and come in here and pay them $50,000, $100,000 a year, and they'll tell you how to increase your ISO rating and make it better. And so that's kind of the baseline of where we're starting. What brought this topic to the top of the agenda for me was I attended a town hall meeting and I heard one of the residents talking about the fire training fields. And there was a comment made, well, why aren't we going to Deer Park, and why aren't we going to Pasadena, and why aren't we going to LaPorte? So I want to give you some background on that information. So the truth is today, we actually go to all of them. We actually rent them for a nominal fee 4 times a year, once per quarter. We go to the Pasadena Fire Training Field primarily because we have a good relationship with them. And we take all of our fire trucks and all of our firemen on a Saturday, and we go there for 4 to 5 hours. Again, we do that 4 times a year. When that occurs, we rely on our mutual aid partners, the Port of Houston and the Kemah. We tell our dispatchers, one of them is here in the room, to notify those fire departments when there's an emergency because we're out training. So that kind of gives you a little bit of baseline of what we do. We have used, in our history of this fire department, we've trained in LaPorte, we've trained in Deer Park, we've trained in Pasadena, which we do regularly, we've trained in Lake City recently, and then, of course, now you start thinking about it, Friendswood has a fire field, Webster has a fire field, Baytown has a fire field. Why does everybody have their fire fields? It's not necessarily because we want our own. That does help. It's because of the insurance service office's rating of your community. And it's, for lack of better terms, the cheapest points you can buy to get a better rating for this city. So let me explain a little bit more. Everybody's insurance declaration page, whether you own a commercial property, whether you own a house, whether you own a multifamily dwelling like 2300 Rebsdorf, has a PPC rating. and that is a public protection classification rating. It's on your declaration page. If it's not, you can call your insurance agent and they will get that for you. Every community in Texas, because we are an ISO state, is rated on that PPC rating. So what happens is ISO, which stands for Insurance Service Offices, which is a for-profit company, is designated by the State Board of Insurance to rate every community in the state. Whether you live in the country, whether you live in Kemah, whether you live in Houston, and your community gets rated. So an overall high-level view of the ISO rating system is this part is simple. It's a 100-point system. If you score 90 to 100, you're an ISO Class 1 fire department or an ISO 1 class community. If you're 80 to 89, you're an ISO Class 2, and so forth. It's very similar to your grade school grading structure. And the points, of course, are broken up into different categories. There's 3 big categories. The first one is emergency communications, which is 10 points for exactly what's sitting in this building, the dispatch office. And they come in and they look at things like, how quick do you answer your 911 call? How quick do you dispatch the fire department? Do you have backup generator systems? Is there a red light that goes off in the dispatch console when the radios are down? They look at this very complex matrix of all these functionalities, and they establish a point system up to 10 points. Generally speaking, we do very well in that. We got 8.3 out of 10 points in the last survey. You were probably all provided with that a couple of years ago. It was the last time they came. From there, there's 40 points of our water supply system, and that's going to be very similar. Is it looped? Is it dead end? Is there generators? Do you have water towers? How much water flow can your hydrant produce? Do you annually test your hydrants? I don't think I need to tell anybody in this room that that's where, when we talk about the cheapest points you can buy, those are the most expensive points you can buy. It's tens of millions of dollars, if not $50 million, to do water systems and put in water lines and make loop systems and things of this nature. Does that sound about right? And we did that. We started doing some of that stuff 20 years ago. For example, the Point was one of our it was a bad water system over there. It had no loop system, it had no connectivity. We got a lot of low points. 20 years ago, there was bonds passed to improve all that infrastructure. The remaining 50 points are the fire department and how you perform, and that's a very complex set of algorithms. So it's not just you have a fire truck, you get a point, you have a ladder truck, you have a point. All the points break down into all sorts of matrix that develop that set of points. They have, after the survey guys come out here, they send all this data to think tanks, and the only people who would probably want to work there are NASA engineers and accountants and people who love numbers, because it's some mystery thing in the back of the office and it takes months to produce. And of course you can question it, challenge it, and things like that. So it's a very complex point system with a lot of algorithms and a lot of algebra. The fire department, for the training, we only got 1.9 credit out of 9 points. One of the reasons, is we don't have our own fire training field. So I told you earlier that we go to Pasadena, we pay a nominal fee. They go, oh, that's really nice, you get a little hash mark. But you get a whole lot of bang for your buck having your own fire training field. Gail, the city manager, is very versed in this. She was here for many years, and she remembers when we did all this 20 years ago. That's when this all started. Was city councils and members of the community voted on those first bonds to build the fire station. And if you're unaware, where the public works sits and the sewer plant sits, that's all bond money that built those roads for a fire training field. The land was donated by a chemical company named American Acryl for the sole purpose of a fire training field, hence for ISO. Fast forward 20 years later, we have a bond now to actually build a fire training facility. It's going to be 3 stories tall, so wide and all this. And we hope to get maximum points, which will help improve our ISO rating. So that in a nutshell, if I explain that well, is why we have a fire training field, why those bonds were passed 20 years ago and then most recently a few years ago, and why we will continue to always improve on that. Other communities like Pasadena, they say, we're going to build a whole fire field and pass one bond and build this whole massive complex for ISO points. So let me review my notes. Do we have any questions? I want to be real careful how deep we dive, but I can entertain some questions and try to answer any if you have any.
Anybody? Go ahead, Rob.
Just two quick questions.
Sure.
Can you clarify how the ISO score affects individual citizens? And if I understood you correctly, the land where the fire training field is currently, right up the road over there, was donated by American Acryl specifically for that purpose.
So I'd like to explain your first question first. And this is exactly the way it was told to me 20, 25 years ago when we had a consultant here in this city and we were going down this path. Let's pretend from ISO 3 to ISO 2, your fire insurance will go down $50 because it's a state-regulated system for the, and we're only talking about the fire piece, folks. We're not talking about flood, we're not talking about windstorm, we're talking about if your house catches on fire. So what the ISO experts will tell you is you take $50 and multiply that by every household. And then if it's $200 for every multifamily community, you multiply that by every one. And then commercial insurance, you multiply that out, hence millions of dollars of savings to you as a customer of insurance because you have a better rating. Does that make sense? Just a little bit of history. I know Joe likes history. When we went down this path in the early 2000s, we had Chris Keneally here, who I'm still a friend with today. He was the Houston fire chief who came to this city, and he is the fire chief who made the city of Houston an ISO 1 fire department. They were not at the time. He brought them to that status. What's interesting about that is I remember Mattress Mac being on the news when that was a big deal for the city of Houston. He got on the news and said, hey, they saved me tens of thousands of dollars in insurance by increasing that rating. So there's arguments that ISO doesn't mean a whole lot today. There's arguments that say it does. It is this system in the state. I know, just like you, I pay insurance and nothing's ever gotten cheaper, ever. But that's the point of all this, right? You invest X amount in your community, you bring your ratings up, and it helps with the insurance. Stepping back into time and trying to keep it positive, because those were the only real bad years of politics for me in the fire department, was 20, 25 years ago. We had a consultant, the city hired their own, and we kind of met in the middle. Part of that, what happened, was American Acryl donated land to us, and they were just coming in. They're not even in the city, but they wanted to be good neighbors, just like the port, and offer concessions. So somehow, some way, we ended up with a chunk of land strictly for fire service, and that's kind of in that ISO thing. Our original intent was to build a fire station there, and keep a fire station there, and keep a fire station right next to you here. That was where we merged and met in the middle, if you will. So that was our ISO plan back in the day, and so that's still the deed, and I know Gail has seen that deed. I haven't seen it in 20 years. It specifically says it can only be used for fire. So as much as we love the police department, they want to build a gun range, we can't do that, right? Because it was deeded that way. So that's, I guess it's that rectangle right there.
Joe?
Does that answer your questions? Okay.
So you said that this ISO is a for-profit company?
It is.
Okay. So there's the issue I have. If you're gonna have to do things to please them to then get insurance rates to go down, and I just heard you say the insurance rates really don't go down. I guess they could. Have you seen the rates go down?
I would challenge anybody to answer that question and find out that answer. I'm not an expert in this field. It used to be just like if you were in a chemical plant, right? Oh my gosh, the auditors are coming, ISO, OSHA's coming. It's that same type of mentality. Well, they've then sent all their people to the College of Chick-fil-A, and they come down and they're super nice, and they call it a survey, and we give you the best points we can. There is a group of people out there, and I'm not siding with either one. It's out there. Well, how much does ISO really play into a community? I can't answer the question. I don't know. I have no idea would it really affect your insurance when it go down. My son's fire department in Channelview, they went from they were way up there because this is a very long story we won't get into. They went from like a 6 or a 7 to a 1 with the consultant and lots of investment, blah, blah, blah. They sent out mailers to every one of their residents and said, you need to, when you renew, tell them you have changed, because they'll just keep renewing your policy and never be the wiser and never do anything for you. You have to actually go ask for it. So that was a huge community push. I don't know.
Well, one thing I do know, there's many companies out there that try to win those awards, like the J.D. Power and Associates. And there's a great example of a company that, let's say, built widgets, and they got so enthralled into trying to just make sure they won the award every year. The company went out of business 2 years later.
Winning awards.
Because you're not there to win awards, you're there to do the right thing. So far, I've always seen the Seabrook Fire Department do their job. So, I mean, we want to give you the equipment you need and that type of thing, but to, push and push and push for things that we may or may not need to maybe get a little bit less of an insurance, I'm sure in some ways it would be good if we actually get the discount, but if we don't, then, but just doing the basics like you guys do, all for it.
And it's ultimately up to city councils and the residents and what they approve in bonds and the decisions you make. I'm not here trying to sell you anything. We've already sold everything we got. But if you want to improve it over the years, you could go through this in a real fine microscope and, we need a reserve ladder truck. Oh, we need to improve the water system. You can just go down the whole list, right? So we're in ISO class 3, if you didn't know that, by the way. And some of the things that we got hit hard on are training and response analysis. So again, I'm not trying to dive too deep into this, but they have formulas that every fire engine has to be 1.5 miles away from an incident, and every ladder truck has to be 2.5 miles away from every incident. And we don't quite meet that threshold because we sit in the center and not all around. So they take that response analysis. How long does it take you to get there? What do you get there with? And of course, what do they look at? They only look at the big structures, 2300 Rebstorf, 3300 Towers, 2401 Meyer, which is the SIS school, and they pretend that whole thing is burning like California, and they go and do all their mathematical calculations based on water and your response, and they come up with these numbers. So it's a complex thing. I don't full-heartedly believe in it either, but this state is an ISO state. That's your roadmap, if you will, for a city. And then we've discussed in the past NFPA, which is best practices. So that's kind of what regulates fire departments and why we do what we do. So, all right, any other questions?
Thank you, Nathan. Anybody else? Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
2.4, receive a presentation from the city's financial advisor and discussion regarding the city's current debt and associated ad valorem tax implications of the May 2025 bond election for the municipal pool and construction of a new police station. Hey, John.
Well, thank you, Mayor, council members. John Roebuck with BOK Financial Securities. Thank you for having me tonight. Tonight, we're going to go through a review of your current debt position, and also analysis of the May 2025 bond election, some options for you to consider for tonight's calling for a bond election. On the first page of the presentation, we go through the basic financing options for Texas cities. And everybody knows that tonight, if we're going to call a bond election, we're going to be selling general obligation bonds. And those are the safest bonds that you can sell. They're backed by ad valorem taxes. They do require a vote. And for an investor standpoint, because they're safest, we get the lowest interest costs on those compared to the other options. Certificates of obligation, they're also ad valorem tax-backed debt, but they usually have a double pledge of a different revenue source, whether it be water, sewer, or sales tax. They are not voted. They are noticed in the paper and also on the website 45 days before you sell the bonds. And they're not quite as safe as investors, but they do carry about the same rate in interest. But again, because it's double pledged with the ad valorem tax and a secondary pledge, it does make them safer than the water and sewer, which is the next option. Water and sewer revenue bonds, they're secured by the net revenues of the system. So as those system revenues fluctuate, you've got to have reserves set aside in case you can't pay for that debt. Now, most cities actually, do water sewer rates enough where they have, ample for a lot of revenues to pay for the debt and also their operations. But you do have to carry those reserve fund requirements, which is costly, and also the debt service coverage requirements, meaning you have to hit a certain metrics before you can issue debt for water sewer. Then the easiest one is pay-as-you-go, which is cash or fund balance. And then the reserve funds, grants, and others, those are like federal funds or disaster relief funds or other funds you may receive from other sources to pay for projects. And on the next page, we'll kind of break down more of the difference between general obligation bonds and certificates of obligation. Again, general obligations do require a vote. I will tell you that if your bond election fails for a specific proposition or project, you cannot issue COs for 3 years. You have to basically sit on the sideline for 3 years before you can issue COs for those projects or certificates of obligation. But you can go out for the next election cycle, or as many election cycles as you want for the same project to basically fund those projects. And then, like I said earlier, COs, certificates of obligation, they are basically a notice. You have to provide public notice in the paper for 2 consecutive weeks, at least 45 days before you sell the bonds. And the publication also needs to be on the city's website for, again, the 45, 46 days prior to the sale of the bonds. They can be petitioned. And again, this is the taxpayers' tool to fight issuing the debt. If you have at least 5% of the qualified or registered voters in the city that sign a petition saying don't issue the debt, then we got to cancel the sale. And then on the next page is overview of your debt. This is a picture of your debt as it stands right now. We have in the past structured the debt to be very conservative, 25-year debt structure. And I do want to point out there the purple line, we structured the debt where it's decreasing after we issue the debt. So you have capacity and your debt service requirements drop after the first couple of years of issuing that debt. So again, tax rate comes down. If projects come up that need to be funded, we have the capacity to issue additional debt to fill in that gap as we go down. I'll also tell you the rating companies view you very highly. Moody's and S&P have a rating of AA3 and AA, which is 2 notches below AAA. So you do have a favorable view in the market by investors, and that does help with interest costs to pay back on those bonds. And I'll point out too, you have about $42.2 million of debt outstanding. That's the principal amount outstanding. But of that, $15.5 million is paid for by other sources, water, sewer, or EDC. And the next page shows this. On the far left, you have your principal and interest and total debt requirements. They're general obligation debt paid for by ad valorem taxes. In the middle there, we pull that out because this section here, $15.5 million, is paid for by water and sewer revenues or sales tax from the EDC. And that's a city policy y'all put in place when you sold this debt, that projects we funded were either water and sewer or they were for the EDC, and y'all are paying that back over time. And that's what that is in the middle. And then your resulting ad valorem or property tax debt is there on the far right. And that's what this bond will actually increase. So you'll see we actually have these ledges or these shelves starting in 27 to 28. We have about, almost $800,000 decrease in debt service requirements on the far right. And so we're filling that in with this debt we're proposing for the May 25 bond election. And then to pay for that debt, we have property taxes, which is the next slide. And each year you all set a tax rate. And of course, most citizens see the total tax rate. In this case, last year was 45.5 cents. But it's made up of 2 components. Maintenance and operations, which is your daily operations, your services, your salaries for your staff, and then the debt service or interest and sinking fund tax rate. And this is what's used to pay for the debt. And each year you all set a tax rate that is used to pay for the next year's debt service requirements, not for the 25-year debt, it's just for the next year debt service requirements. And so over the last 10 years, because of your fiscal management policies, y'all been able to reduce that tax rate by over 15.74 cents. And tonight, talking about the bond election, we're only going to talk about the ad valorem, the INS or the debt service tax rate, not the maintenance and operation. That is done based on what's needed for salaries and, again, operations. And city staff does a good job of managing that. On the next page, another factor that goes into, again, the cost of debt is the interest rates. And this is the bond buyer index. This is a weekly average of municipal rates across the country. The blue line represents, again, the index. We're currently at a 4.19%. And that's about 10 basis points above the historical average over the last 24, 25 years. I will say, in Texas, we're seeing debt being sold a lot less than this right now. And I don't know if it's just because we're a safer bet in Texas, but we could probably sell right now, if we were to sell bonds, about the 405 to 410 range interest rates. So we are seeing some volatility in the market, obviously. After the election, it's got somewhat more stable, but there's still some questions about what's going to happen to tariffs, which are implemented today for China, and then also just, the policies that the new president's going to put in place and what that's going to do to the economy. So still a little volatility, but again, we're seeing a little bit more stability since the election. And then the next page, we get into the tax rate impact analysis for the May 2025 bond election. And we ran 3 different scenarios. The first scenario is for Proposition A, which I believe is for the pool. Is that correct, Gail? Right. Did I get that backwards?
Scenario 1, 18 million's for the police station.
Police station, excuse me. Okay. Yeah, scenario 1, 18 million for the police station. So we're in that on a standalone basis if that were to pass by itself. And the impact basically is 4.7 cents on the tax rate. So we go from a debt service tax rate of 10.391 cents up to 15.15 cents. Scenario 2 is 4 million for the pool. And we'd go from, it'd be increased just on a standalone basis of about 1.6 cents. So we go from 10.3 to 12.05 cents. And then we did scenario 3, we combined both of them. If both propositions passed for $22 million, the impact is about 5.5 cents. So we'd go from 10.39 cents on the debt service tax rate to 15.9 cents. And you'll notice the peak tax rate is just the next 2 years, and then it drops after that. Again, we structure the debt so decreasing debt in the future, so you have capacity for other needs as they come up. In the next couple of slides, we actually provide the dirty details on how we get to those tax rate calculations. There's a lot of numbers on this page, but just if you go from left to right, you start with your debt service fund balance. And you want to keep a debt service fund balance in case there's, clutches don't come in like they're supposed to. But in the rating companies, we want to see about 15 to 20% coverage, which is on the far right column. But we take your beginning fund balance, we put your interest earnings on that fund balance, and then your value, taxable assessed valuation, is the big driver of the tax rate. As that's grown, it's grown 5.82 since last year. It continues to grow. I think your 5-year average is 7%, and your 10 years average is a little over that, a little like 7.3 percent, growth. So we're conservative with our growth assumptions of 5% for 2 years, then 4%, 3%, and then 2%, and then 1%. And there you see that there in the yellow column, the tax rate increase from 10.391 to 15.15. And again, this is for the $18 million police station. And you'll see your total debt service in the first blue column, plus the new debt, and then less the self-supporting debt, which is, again, it's the water and sewer and EDC debt. Your total debt service requirements, which we base your tax rate on, is there in the far right blue column. And then again, you'll see on the debt service coverage, we keep it about 15 to 20% to keep your rating healthy. And so we can sell the bonds with lower interest rates. Then scenario 2 is on the next page. For the pool, same numbers, except we layered in that first green column of 4 million instead of 18 million. And again, we go from 10.39 cents to 12.05 cents. So an increase of 1.6 cents. And then on the scenario 3, we did 22 million, combined the two, if they both passed. And then the increase would be, again, like we said earlier, 5.5 cents. So we go from 10.39 cents to 15.9 cents. And again, you're seeing economy of scale. It doesn't add up. If you add the first two scenarios together, you're not going to get the third scenario because there's economy of scale, so interest, cost of issuance, and also just be able to layer that debt in at the same time and together. The last page is just the timetable. So tonight, I think we're talking about calling the bond election. The deadline to call that bond election is February 14th. Then you'll publish the notice of the election. You'll post it on your website. Early voting will begin April 21st. Bond election is Saturday, May 3rd. And if it passes, then you'll do a canvass of the election results from May 6th to the 14th. And then you have a 30-day contest period. But we'll probably sell those bonds if it passes, again, with staff's direction, in July 2025, and then close about a month later, at which point the proceeds will be received by the city. Kind of went through that pretty quick, and I know there's a lot of detail, a lot of numbers on especially the tax rate analysis, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Mr. Dietz, your bond counsel, is here with Oric. He's the one who drafted the election order, and I'm sure he can answer any questions you have on that election order. We're asking you to approve tonight.
Joe?
Okay, go back on the slide, please, to the graph, back one, I think might be 2. Stop right there. What I read, keep going, go up a little so I can see the bottom right there. The other way. Right there. I read 60,323,957 is the total debt to this city. I don't know why we needed a ton of all this 10-page document. You got $1, and I'm talking to the citizens of Seabrook. You got $1 right here. 78 cents per every dollar is what we're in debt. 78 cents. Do you want to increase that? You want to decrease it? There it is. So I don't know why we needed all this. That's the way you do it. You got $1.78 of every dollar goes to your debt. Would you do that at your own personal home? I doubt it.
Anybody else?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay, I asked the city manager to run some figures on our current debt to equity ratio, and we are currently at 1.11. So for every dollar we have $1.11 debt. Is that correct?
Repeat that, because I'm not sure.
Debt to equity ratio,
Okay, so your equity, you're talking about your assets.
or
Because we view it, so you're viewing the entire debt. So if you look at say you buy a house. Let's say you buy a $200,000 house. You're not paying the $200,000 the first year, you're spending it over 30 years. So you're going to pay, call it $1,000, $800, whatever, $700 a month. So you spread that over the course of time, so it's paid for over a 30-year period, not at one time, which I think, is that what you were saying, 78 cents for every dollar? But you're looking at that one point in time, right? Because you're going to receive $1 probably every year, right? Right. So,
But you still have the debt. You still have that debt. It always will be there until you reduce it. So if you're adding something to it, you're increasing it.
Yes, sir.
Came from an accountant. And by the way, I said I'd be nice. So I have guests here from Dairy Queen today that I talked to. So I promised I'd be very nice the way I handled this.
okay, I also asked Gail for these three bond scenarios, the option one, which was for the police station, that would be putting our debt to equity ratio at 3.15. Option two for just the pool would be 1.41. Option three for the police department and the pool would be 3.69. So that's alarming to me, because we're pretty much, I feel like if you were to compare it to a personal finances, you'd be kind of maxing out your credit cards. You know, your credit score is going to be low.
So can I?
Sure.
So we look at ratios a little differently in our world. Debt to equity, I'm not sure exactly where that came from or how that's.
Well, overall, for the whole budget.
Right. But you're talking your assets in the ground, which have a useful life of potentially 40, 50 years, right? Because you're talking about your capital assets. You're comparing that debt to that, correct?
How did we get, yes.
Okay, so it's point in time calculation. I don't think that's correct. You got to basically divide that by 30 years, correct? Because you have
25.
assets that last that long. So we look at it on a debt to taxable assessed valuation, because that's what's going to determine your capacity to issue debt. And right now, that's about a 2.13%. Across the state, it's closer to 3.5%. So you have a very low debt compared to your taxable assessed valuation, which is why your debt service tax rate's only 10 cents.
I'm not following you, but okay. I feel like we're getting more credit because for example, our enterprise fund is heavy, but we don't need, the enterprise fund is not supposed to be sitting there with all this extra money in it. I mean, it's supposed to cover your operating cost of what it's used for. So by having that a hefty fund, we're borrowing against what that is. You know what I mean? Is that not right?
Well, in municipal finance, when we're selling tax-supported debt, we look at your taxable assessed valuation. The enterprise fund doesn't really come into play unless you designate that debt as water and sewer or EDC, sales tax-related debt. So we don't look at the fund balance of water and sewer. The rating companies don't look at the water and sewer fund balance. They look at what's your value, what's the tax rate, and what's your fund balance on your debt service fund.
Okay, well, you also have on here that it's based on assuming a $300,000 average home value
Right.
and includes the city's local optional homestead exemption. Well, we have several apartments in the city that one came off of our tax roll. I'm sure that doesn't, is that a realistic average, $300,000?
Oh, we just,
I mean, who came up with that number?
just pulled that, just looked at that. I mean, we literally, it was 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. We decided $300,000
Okay, so you're just putting a number in there?
to the number there. I'm not sure what your average home value is in the city right now.
Okay.
Doesn't that factor in?
No, because I mean, it's the total assessed valuation. So you take all the companies, all the homes, all the commercial properties, all the multifamily homes, housing units, and that total value is what determines your tax rate. It's not the individual homes. It's your total value.
Okay, why is that on here then? I mean, it's kind of misleading. I mean, all of this whole presentation is extremely hard to read for an average person, and I've been looking at it for days.
If you look at page 8, presentation.
Okay,
So on the fourth column, prior year estimated taxable assessed valuation, that is the number. That's your total taxable assessed valuation of the city. That's a combination of every building, every property that's basically got a value on it. And so that is the number that we use to determine what the tax rate is going to be. So as that grows, tax rate can come down. Or, you know, if you add debt, then obviously it's the same where it goes back. The tax
and what
rate
if it doesn't grow because we have apartments falling off the tax roll?
well, hopefully that's going to stop because I know
Well, not anytime soon. I mean, you know, we need to consider that.
the state has, yeah, they're fighting that right now.
You said we're a couple notches from the top score. What prevents us from not being at the top score?
Your proximity to the coast. Your proximity to the coast.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have right this
There's
second.
very few AAA rated cities.
Gotcha. Okay, that's all I have for right now.
One more thing. I'm in the National Football League. I could talk where you would not have a clue what I was talking about a football game or this upcoming Super Bowl. I could use terms and I could use all sorts of graphs and charts and all that, and you would have no clue what I was doing because I can get that in depth to it. So I guess what we're also saying, and people have said this to me, we didn't need 9 pages just in a very short term. That's why I pulled out the dollar. We have 78 cents per dollar is going to pay off our debt. I think it needs to be talked about that simple. And you're trying to sell it, so you're not going to, oh, you guys don't need it. You're actually the one selling this. So I think we could simplify it a lot and explain it to the people why this is a good idea to not go into more debt.
On slide 7, this is probably a summary that I always go back to because this gives you what the impact on the tax rate is, and then again, it gives you the impact on the average home value. Now, again, I'm assuming $300,000, but if you look at what we're required to in the statute under the bond election order, it's a $100,000 home with no exemptions. And that's, if the 2 pass, I think it's $55.10 increase in a $100,000 home, which equates to, I think I wrote this down somewhere, it's about $4.59 a month. I don't know how to, that's about as simple as I can get it. On a $100,000 home. On a $300,000 home, it's going to be, again, it's the $133 annual impact on the tax rate and $11 a month for both the scenarios.
Rob?
Yeah, it makes sense that the wastewater water income, the enterprise fund, isn't really considered. When I saw the comments and emails about debt to equity, I started digging into it and how you can accurately evaluate the fiscal health of municipality, because that's really what this is about. Are we fiscally healthy enough to assume this additional debt? Debt to equity is something that I would absolutely want to look at if I was going to buy a company, because I own part of that company, and if it fails, I want to make sure it has enough equity to cover the losses. Municipalities and government funding are a completely different thing, so I started digging into how to evaluate that. Came across Measuring the Fiscal Health of Municipalities from the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, published at North Carolina State University in May 2017. It goes into pretty exhaustive detail about how to evaluate the fiscal health of a municipality. It considers 3 different methodologies for doing so. The debt to equity is not in any of those methodologies. It's very derogatory towards ratios overall as far as determining the health of a company, of a municipality. One of the things that is a strength in this and some of the other research I've done on it is the reserves that a municipality moves forward with. Regardless of where the money is, Seabrook came out of COVID and building the bridge with a surplus that far exceeds the state average of 25% of our operating fund. I don't know the exact number. We're in very good shape financially. We have, as we saw in the graph earlier, a great deal of debt that's dropping off in the next 2 years, which coincidentally, it's going to take a year, a little longer for us actually have to start paying, for the city to have to start paying for the debt we're talking about now. There's a lot of discussion about planning for the future and what our police department needs to prepare us for the next several years. From everything I can see, the city is in a very healthy position and very well positioned to assume debt if that's what we decide to do, if that's what the citizens decide to do, to protect us in the long term.
And I will point out, great point. So just because you
look over
vote the
later.
debt or the citizens approve the bond election, doesn't mean you have to issue it. I mean, it just gives you authorization to issue it. So if we find out that police station comes in at 16, 17, 18 million, which would be great. I mean, I'm not sure if that's the case, but if it does, then we only issue $16 million and we don't issue the additional $2 million. So this is just to give you authorization. When we sell the bonds, it's, that's when you lock in the interest rates, you lock in the commitment, and it hits your books. So this is just asking for the authorization from voters at this point. So we're not selling bonds right now.
Mike?
In your professional opinion, since you've done this for many other cities, and I need to know all the numbers and everything, how do you see us rated? I agree with Rob. I think we're in financial stability. We have the ability to do this. What is your personal opinion? Just looking at the paperwork and working with other cities, you feel, we wouldn't get into something if we were going to get in debt. None of us would. It's common sense.
There's my reputation.
Yeah, so.
Y'all's financial position is very strong. It's evidenced by the rating companies. They have a AA, S&P, AA3, Moody's. I'm working with the city right now. We're selling $30 million of debt in a couple weeks, and they've got an A rating, and it was A-, and they're going to pay a lot more interest costs than you will because they're not there yet. They're not fiscally responsible like y'all are. So.
Well, like we said, over the last 10 years, we've dropped our taxes by 15 cents over that period of time, and that's being fiscally responsible. We have seen these expenses coming, and we prepared for it. Yeah, we are going up a hair, but we're talking about $11, $12 a month on the average $300,000 home. There are people in this town that can't afford that. I understand that. But the majority of Seabrookians know that, we have to spend money. And in order to get the services that they want, we do have to acquire debt. We've done it in the past. We are always fiscally responsible to pay those debts off. And we cut to the quick if we need to. And so year after year, we have a balanced budget. And all of this debt service is included in those budgets. And we'll do it again. The citizens actually aren't the ones that really suffer. They do pay that debt, but they don't suffer for services. They require those services. And those services cost money. And so, for the additional, 11 cents per hundred, I find it very fiscally responsible that that's what we're doing.
Well, I guess another way to look at it is a math way. You got 60 million in debt, actually a little bit more. And then you have 14,000. Actually, we have a little less, but we'll just use the 14,000 number. You divide 14,000 into 60 million. That's $4,285.71 of debt per person in the city of Seabrook.
Over what period of time? Not
It's
today.
still a debt.
Not over what period of time? 30 years?
I can understand the numbers on debt when you start looking at it. But then if you start looking at what we've spent the money on in the past, I mean, there's not much nice to have in there. It's all gotta haves. Fire truck, gotta have. Drainage, gotta have. Safety equipment, gotta have. Improvement to streets, gotta have. And that's gonna go forward. And it's just no different than like your house. I mean, there's nobody wants to line up to get a new roof on your house, but that's one of the things you do. Some people can pay cash and some people got to finance. Now, if we don't want to go forward and say, gee, let's contribute another nickel per hundred, then we're not going to be able to lower taxes like we've done it when we can. And that's what it kind of comes down to. And if the community says, I don't want to go in debt, fine. Then council, this one and future councils are going to have to say, we can't lower property taxes, even though for this year and the next 5 years we can do it. So, I mean, that's just kind of the decision.
So this is what the other people have told me at Dairy Queen. They said, why didn't we have this discussion prior to any of these votes? Why didn't we talk about this debt that we already have prior to even putting that on the first time? We didn't do this. This exercise came up because Jackie put it on. And, well, I put it on too, but my point is, this got put on the agenda to talk about this because people have actually talked to us and said, hey, wait a minute, do you realize how much debt you have?
No, that's not true. I've been on council for over 10 years, and we've had this every time this has come forward. We've always had this document.
Not in this depth. Not in this
Sir,
depth.
this gentleman has come up here every single time. Absolutely.
Okay. So Jackie put this on, and I saw your email this afternoon, and I think it's in there, you say, you realize there needs to be a police station, but now is not the time. So when is the time, and how's it going to be done? Are you going to?
Hearing from the residents, also did a weird relying on the residents' tax-paying money more than our commercial development, and that's where we need to even out.
Okay, well, I agree with you there, but I remember in your own record, no warehouses north of Red Bluff, so what kind of commercial development can we do? We're land poor, and where are we going to put it, and what is it going to be? I mean.
Yeah, buddy, you're on economic development, but I have tons of ideas, and I'll get them to you. Okay?
When?
Why hasn't EDC done what they should be doing?
Okay,
and
we're off subject.
Oh, I knew we were going to go there. So, by the way, Rachel, make sure that next agenda we talk about all the money that has been wasted since I got on in 2017. Gail, you know that. You've already sent me the email once. You'll have to send it again. And believe me, it's over hundreds of thousands of dollars. That it's not been transparent. Some of it we've talked about in closed executive session. So now it's going to all be public. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, we appreciate it. Any more questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
This will be an interesting next meeting.
Yeah, sure will. Okay, 3.0, the consent agenda. 3.1, approve the minutes of the January 23rd, 2025 City Council meeting.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. 4.0, boards and commissions. 4.1, consider and take all appropriate action on the approval of members from Old Seabrook resident applications and business owner applications to serve on the Bayside Park Extension Stakeholder Group. Yeah.
I'll take.
Okay.
So I wanted to thank Joe McCall, Councilman Joe McCall, for helping in the, and assisting in the interview process. I think it was a learning experience, and certainly got an opportunity to hear from some and a lot of the citizens about what direction they may like to go into. So thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. I'd like to make a motion to approve these four nominations, or these four applications: Christy Hatfield, Jennifer Pitts, Robert Hank Kidd, and Chris Coleman.
Second.
We have any more discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Thank you. 4.2, consider and take action on the approval of Ann Wacker as nominated by the Economic Development Corporation, Jesse Jones is nominated by the Open Space and Trails Committee, and two subject matter experts, Haley Leja of the Galveston Bay Foundation and Matthew Abernathy of the Galveston Estuary Program, for membership on the Bayside Park Extension Stakeholder Group.
Move to approve 4.2.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. 3.0, consider and take action on the approval of a member of the City Council to serve on the Bayside Park Extension Stakeholder Group.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Buddy Hammond to be on that as council representative on the stakeholders group.
Second.
Any more discussion? Any more nominations? All in favor? Thank you. 5.0, new business. 5.1, consider and take all appropriate action on the first and final reading of ordinance 2025-01, ordering the general election to be held on May 3rd, 2025 for mayor, council member position 2, council member position 4, and council member position 6. These positions are for 4-year terms to expire in May 2029. An ordinance calling and establishing procedures for the general city officers' election for mayor and city council positions 2, 4, and 6 to be held on May 3rd, 2025, and for a runoff election on June 7th, 2025, if required, and making other provisions related to these elections.
Move to approve 5.1.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. 5.2, consider and take all appropriate action on the first and final reading of ordinance 2025-02, ordering a special city officer election to be held on May 3rd, 2025, to fill a vacated seat of council member position 1 for a 1-year unexpired term.
Move to approve 5.2.
Second.
Let me finish reading it. An ordinance calling for establishing procedures for a special city officer's election for council position 1 for an unexpired term to be held on May 3rd, 2025, and for a runoff election on June 7th, 2025, if required, and making other provisions related to these elections. I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Thank you. 5.3, consider and take all appropriate action on the first and final reading of ordinance 2025-03, calling for a special election on May 3rd, 2025, to consider 12 propositions amending the City of Seabrook Charter. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Seabrook calling for and establishing procedures for a special election to be held on May 3rd, 2025, to consider 13 charter amendments recommended by the Seabrook Charter Review Commission and determined for submission by City Council, making provisions for the conduct of a joint election and resolving other matters and making other provisions incident and related to this election.
Move to approve 5.3.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'd like to talk about Proposition 9. No, they're different on these two, so let's see, it would be the one about the recalls. Which one is that? Because there's, they're not the same numbers.
Yeah, the only reason that there's 12 instead of 13 is basically we had two
actions of the Charter Review Commission that did essentially the same thing, allow for P and Z to serve on the master plan. We combine those into one
gotcha.
question. There's no reason to ask the voters that question twice, so.
Okay.
But if you look at Proposition 9, it does deal with the recall.
Okay, on Proposition 9 and all the details that are changed in here, pretty much makes it almost impossible to recall a official. So I don't think we should take the recourse away from the people. I'd like to add to this, and last time we discussed this, they told me this is the time to discuss it, that abuse of power, ignoring public input, or failure to represent the community, or a neglect of duties, failure to perform responsibilities, or repeated inability or unwillingness to address city issues, that kind of go, they could either be grouped, or we could go with the first one, but I would like to add this to the amendment.
One of the things I'd like even less, the reason I say that is if someone wants to recall someone, they have that right.
I agree.
It's like, you know, that it's very difficult in the state laws of Texas to recall somebody. So, you know, adding more to it. And then the other thing is, in all transparency, I strongly disagree, which I heard was that this just happened to be talked about. You know, they actually started talking about it. No one started talking about a recall till after July. So anyway, and then some of the things they put in there, like who's going to determine if you're mentally capable or whatever? Who's that person? You know, so you have those kind of stuff in there. People just stick stuff in there. That's crazy in my book.
You know, I really don't have a problem of a recall for any reason or no reason at all. However, what happened in the last recall, my name was there, and there's a bunch of people, and so I was going down the list of the people that had signed, and I contacted several that I knew, and they said, buddy, I didn't sign to recall you. I was signing a petition against the freezer warehouse. So if we're going to say you can recall for any reason or no reason at all, then the petitioner should be held to some degree, or no, to a very tight degree of telling the truth of what people were signing. And if we find that there's evidence where it's been misrepresented, then I think the recall should be thrown out.
It's, you mentioned it hadn't been discussed before. I was on Charter Review 5 years ago. If I remember correctly, we did talk about it some because it seemed very wide open. We took no action on it at the time. But it is highlighted in my 5-year-old copy of the Charter Review. It's not a new thing. My personal opinion, it shouldn't be just wide open. Shouldn't be able to file a recall against somebody because they're going bald. There needs to be some kind of specifics that justify it. Whether I disagree with this list is neither here nor there. I wasn't on the Charter Review Commission. They put this forward for us to review, for it to go to the voters.
And it's basically making it impossible unless they are completely, like if they break a federal law, of course. It is doing misappropriation of funds. I mean, yes, that's also illegal. I mean, these things are either illegal or incompetent by mental illness. Come on. We should at least have ignoring public input or something. I'm not saying, you know, neglect of duties or failure to listen to the public. Why can't we add some of those legitimate reasons for people that should have the right to recall their officials if they, you know, it's not just, oh, okay, we just recall them. It takes a lot of effort for them to have a successful recall. So I'm sure anybody on a recall committee would not take this, you know, on lightly, but to just dismiss all the, you know, this is, you're taking the recourse away from the people, and that's not right.
So read me what you want in there.
I would like to add abuse of power, ignoring, and to, you know, 2 line items. Abuse of power, which would go into ignoring public input or failure to represent the community, and then neglect of duties, failure to perform responsibilities or repeated inability or unwillingness to address city issues.
Okay, and I have one too, because I'm just reading this. I've read it before, but I see B right in front of me. non-compliance with charter. So I know of non-compliance with charter right now. So, okay, what is it? What do you have?
I don't know, it was something about the flowers and a flagpole and some other stuff like that that were clearly against charter. But regardless, that's not the topic at hand. These items right here are.
Okay, you interrupted me. Well, no, you interrupted me. I had the floor. Knock it off. So here's the thing. You want to bring up that? Great, we're going to bring it up. So one of the things that we're doing is
We're not going to bring it up.
Hey, I'm talking.
No, we're not going to bring it up. We're off subject. We're
No,
talking
we're
about.
talking about B, non-compliance.
Okay,
That's what I'm talking about.
okay.
Golly. So with B, non-compliance, we have a thing in the city of Seabrook that says that all lights have to have deflectors, but we don't do that. So that's not complying with the charter. We're not following our own ordinance. The other thing is, on some of the charters or some of the, not charters, but commissions and boards, they're not following their rules. Last year, one of them didn't turn in 3 reports. They only turned in 1. So what are we going to do about that? That's my question.
I would support not modifying section 8.05 before I would support making it a 2-page list of qualifications to be able to disqualify somebody, to recall. We're talking about adding, well, we already have A, B, C, and D on there. I swiped the page too hard there. We already have A, B, C, and D in there. We're talking about E, F, G, H, maybe I. Let's not make it more complicated than it has to be.
Any more discussion? Jackie, did you make a motion to amend it?
I make a motion to amend approving the charter amendments to include abuse of power, ignoring public input, and failure to represent the community, I'm sorry. I'll take my last sentence out, so we'll just have an E.
When you say respect the community, please explain it.
Represent, I mistakenly said respect. Represent the community. Failure to represent the community.
So when you say represent, that means you don't go out and tear the community down in other venues and things like that?
No, I mean like ignoring what the majority of people are coming to you with concerns and you're not addressing them.
Okay.
Can we ask the lawyer for clarification? Because I think that's too broad. I can't.
Well, let's take a step back and recognize what we're doing here. We're establishing basically a requirement that somebody, when they want to put together a petition for recall, have to state a ground. We don't decide whether those grounds have merit or not. The voters will be the judge and jury of whether or not a ballot proposition for recall for a stated purpose rises to the level of whatever it is. So regardless, I mean, some of the stuff on here, like non-compliance with charter, misconduct, obviously we're talking about incidences that we can kind of point to. But again, we're not the ones that decide whether or not action of a council, the petitioners decide. So when you look at stuff like incompetence, the first part of that shall mean gross ignorance of official duties. That's pretty broad too. That's subject to interpretation, but it's meant to be. It's meant to be broad so that the voters can then. The only thing that I think that the commission was looking at, the Charter Review Commission, and us at the staff level when this came up, was just having them qualify something to eliminate the possibility of a petition being circulated for something in which the average person wouldn't understand. If a petition is presented to a resident and for recall with a stated purpose, it's still going to be fairly broad. However, at least the voters know what the charge against the individual council member is before they vote on it. It's just to give a little clarity to the voter. It's nothing in here is going to preclude a petition from coming forward because, again, if they meet the necessary minimum requirements for that petition and a stated purpose, we don't decide whether there's merit to that. The voters do.
Jackie's got a motion.
So then why even have it? That's what I'm saying. It shouldn't even be in here. If the people want to recall their elected officials, which includes me, they have that right. That's the way it should be. You don't have to have, like, I have to come up with some reason that pleases who? That's the point.
Well, take another step back and recognize that there is no right of recall. Cities can elect to put that in their charter if they want to. There's no general law right of recall of an elected official. That's a judicial process. Home rule cities are afforded the opportunity to include that in their charter if they so choose. Not every city does. So start under that premise, and then you decide what makes sense as a matter of policy for this body.
Okay.
Well, with the clarification of the incompetence shall mean gross ignorance of official duties, I guess could be interpreted to include what I'm trying to add. So I'll withdraw my motion.
So, Council, as I understand it, so if somebody would come up and say that Buddy Hammond failed to represent the community, and that's the reason for the recall, then it's up to the voter to determine whether I did or didn't.
Correct.
Okay, there's no proof that has to come forward that I did or didn't represent in order for the recall to go forward.
That's correct.
So this is just nothing more than putting some words on the recall.
Yes. Essentially, bottom line, yes. This is just another step that they have to take to identify a reason versus just open-ended. But it's not going to preclude a recall if they have the number of necessary signatures.
So you rescinded it, okay. All right. Was there anything else in the charter that we want to discuss in the amendments? That being said, can I get a motion?
We have a motion and a second on the approval.
On the approval, okay.
We're just waiting on a vote on that.
All in favor of the approval of the charter, go ahead. Wait a minute. Are you voting or?
We are voting on the underlying ordinance called.
I thought you wanted to ask a question. No. Okay.
Correct.
All,
To call the
okay.
election.
All in
That's what
favor,
we're
all in favor of putting the charter amendments on the election? All in favor? Thank you. Unanimous. Uh, 5.4, consider and take all appropriate action on the first and final reading of ordinance 2025-04, calling for a special bond election on May 3rd, 2025 for the construction of a new police facility and a new city pool facility.
I move to approve 5.4.
I'm not done reading.
Oh, I'm sorry.
An ordinance calling a special bond election to be held within the city of Seabrook, making provisions for the conduct and giving of notice for special election and containing other provisions hereto. Now you can do something.
Okay, I move to approve 5.4.
Second.
Any more discussion?
That is just voting to put the bond items on the election.
Correct. Nothing more. We're not approving anything. All in favor? All opposed? Okay. 5.5, consider and take all appropriate action on a request to amend the International Energy Conservation Code 2021 edition, Chapter 4, Residential Energy Efficiency, Section 4.01, General subsection R401.3, certificate by amending subsection 401.3, certificate by adding language that states certificates have to be legible.
Okay, do you got those pictures, please? Okay, leave that one up. Okay, so this was the original certificate that I got on my house, and it was rejected because of size. However, when I was talking to Sean, they talked about it needed to be legible. Pretty legible to me, so I understand that. We want to have it legible. But like I said, it originally failed for being this size. Now that's the bottom part of the electric box. Now go to the next pictures. So the one now is up at the top. Now, can you, I think I have another one that's a little closer. Can you zoom in on that just a little bit? Okay, so, not that much, but there, right there, that's good. Perfect, right there, that's good. So, but what I'm saying about that is, it's clear tape, it's the same information. This actually is smaller print-wise than it was before. But what I was trying to make a point is, when you tell someone their house fails inspection because of the size, I had a problem with that. Now, legibility, now here's the other thing. I read up on this too. It says inside. This is considered inside because it's inside the box. The way I read it was they have them inside up in your attic, which actually indoors. Like this can get rain on it. Like this will get wet one day and that tape will come off and it won't be there anymore. But I'm just, for the purposes of what we're trying to do, I understand the code books are super thick, but is it more of legibility, size? I mean, I could have blown it up or they could have blown it up and made it the whole inside of the box. I'd like to get a little bit more clarification.
Again, the suggestion on legibility was simple to any certificate. I would agree that is legible. I don't know that that's the correct information in this particular case. If you compare the two, if those are both from your house, I think you would notice that there's some incorrect information on this plaque that's put in here. I can't really read the signature. I'm assuming that's the builder, but that doesn't actually match the approved information or to what the house was constructed to. But nonetheless, also, as I stated specifically, we're simply, to generally answer the question, we're simply looking for the information that's required per the code section, and that it is legible. Yeah. And we hold that across the board for
Right.
every home.
Perfect. That should handle it.
For clarification, though, are you looking for an amendment? By policy, we enforce this the same across the board. We're looking for that. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions on a specific home if you had a question, but in general, we're looking at the two examples. I would agree that they're legible, whether they're correct information. That's something we need to check when we're in the field.
And then I've talked to some other cities. Not all cities do this, not all, but I understand in the code book, I guess there's certain things we do, some things we don't. I guess this is important. But again, going back to the original reason I brought that up was the size, being told that your home fails because of size, I had an issue with. But now I think we've solved the issue, so I'm quite happy with it.
Thank you.
Okay. 6.0, discussion regarding clarification on legislative funds for the Christmas boat parade.
Okay, so again, we voted that we weren't going to give the Christmas boat parade the $2,000 from hot tax. So last week I was out of town, but I still attended the meeting with this big head thing here. But now I'm here. So I contacted the city manager and I said, hey, wait a minute. I don't remember approving the $2,000. And by the way, to set the record straight, I support the Christmas boat parade. I liked it. But we decided as a group not to do it through hot tax. Yet it got funded. And I said, well, how did it get funded? And the mayor said that he had donated personal money prior, but this last year and this year upcoming was going to be out of the general fund. Well, how did that get there? Well, I was told that there's many items that get put into the general fund, and when we approve the budget, they're thrown in there. Well, that worries me because what else got put in there? Because I understand, you know, if we had to go down the line item, we're going to be here for months, and we'll be here for 6-8 hours a day going through everything in the budget. But I guess my question is this. It's not I guess. This is my question. If we say no to hot tax, how does it then get into the general fund to then do, you know, to support it? I'm just trying to get the mechanics of how that worked.
When it came up, there was the dues for Chamber of Commerce. There was a separate vote for $2,000 for the parade. That's how it came up. And that's the way we've been doing it.
No, that's not what Gail told me. She said it just got put into the general fund, and when we have approved the whole budget, that was in there. And then how would you know, buddy? Like, how would you know this information? Who have you talked to? Because there's no way you remember that.
I was talking about how it came about, not necessarily the detail of the counting, but
the detail of the counting is kind of important. By the way, the other term that was used by the city manager was there's hundreds of items like that. That's worrisome, very concerning. There's hundreds of items like, and people pay attention to the news. They just defunded this USA thing, and they're given, you know, 20 million here, 10 million there, and 50,000 here, all these other countries, and doing this aid stuff. I hope we're not doing anything like that. Obviously not to a foreign government, but my point is, are there other things like that? But more specifically, I'm trying to find out the mechanics of how the $2,000 went from we are not going to fund it in hot tax, but then got on to the general fund and it was funded. I'm just trying to figure out the mechanics of that.
Well, regardless of how it was, let me ask you a question. How do you want to fund it? I mean, we have an opportunity to say how we want to fund it. How do you want to fund it? What pot do you want to take it out of? I mean,
I'm not sure yet.
It isn't hot. EDC doesn't want to pay for the boat parade. They paid for the Chamber of Commerce, but they didn't pay the additional $2,000 for the boat parade. So at some point, you know, where do we want to take it from? Or do you want to not do it? I don't care.
No. Okay, here's my question.
It was either I take it out of my stipends and pay for it, or.
But that wasn't a choice given to us. I'm talking about when we were up here and once we say, okay, if we're talking about hot tax money and someone says, we're not going to fund this bottle of water, then I thought it went away. Then all of a sudden it reappears in general fund. That's the mechanics. And I haven't heard from the city manager yet. I'm wanting that answer, but
I think we did discuss it, Joe. I remember it because I was the one that didn't have to pay for it anymore. So it came to the point where, okay, do we want to do the boat parade or don't we? And I said, well, you know, it's not sustainable for me to keep taking it out of my funds. So we said, well, what other place can we get it? And I think Gail said, well, we can take, if it's only $2,000, we can take it out of general fund, which we did. But we all discussed that. I remember it 100% because, and it's probably been 4 or 5 years now that we discussed that. But it was the fact that I no longer was going to pay for it and do we want to keep the boat parade going? It wasn't going to be hot tax. It wasn't going to be EEC. It was either there or nothing. So what did we want? Where did it come from? I think it was just a matter of, well, for $2,000, we'll take it out of general funds, and the city will pay for it. That's how it came down. No more than that. But we were all in that discussion here at this dais.
I usually remember a lot of these type of discussions. I guess that's the part that I'm missing. Again, I think it's admirable that you spent $2,000 of your own money.
It wasn't my own money.
Oh, it was stipend money. Your stipend money to then go to the Christmas boat parade. I get that. And I don't mind.
What was happening was, if you recall, when we used to get a stipends, we also got a 1099 at the end of the year. Nobody wanted that 1099 anymore. We didn't want to have a salary. So we stopped doing that, and when that stopped, then there wasn't the opportunity to take it out of stipends. So where was it going to come from? It wasn't in the legislative budget anymore. It can come, if we want to put it in the legislative button, it's the same pot.
Right, okay.
It's just a different department.
Okay, and so I think there's where the clarification's starting to come a little bit more clear. So once we said it's not coming from your stipend and it wasn't coming from hot funds, you're saying that there was a discussion that it was going to go into general fund to then fund it. I don't remember that
Well,
discussion.
it was either legislative funds, and remember Robin at the time was our city secretary, and coming out of legislative, we discussed that, it's a strain for her because, we were sharing that amongst everybody. And so it became a problem, and we said she wasn't going to put it in her budget.
So that's all I was trying to do is clarify it, because again, when I go back and I think about certain things, I was like, well, wait a minute. And it was all because of the way it was written on the program for the Christmas boat parade. And then it said this year, it said, sponsored by Seabrook. And I was like, why? I didn't think that's why. So now it's making more sense.
Nobody wanted the 1099 at the end of the year.
Okay. I'm just, for the record, I don't remember the conversation. If you're saying it happened.
Well, I mean, that's how I recall it, because
Okay. Okay, well then that clears it up. So now this does not have to come back up on the agenda.
Well, but I think there still needs to be discussion as to where future councils want to take it. Where do we want it to come from?
Well, there's people who told me they actually come down from Houston and stay in hotels. Didn't say they stayed in the Seabrook Hotel.
Okay, then the new hot tax committee can look at it. Okay,
Now that's fair.
okay. 7.0, executive session. 7.1, conduct a closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551.071, consultation with the attorney regarding legal matters, and 551.072, deliberate and consider the purchase, exchange, or lease or value of real property located in the city of Seabrook. It is 7:32.
Don't forget to fill out my form.
I will.
You know I know.
We've returned from executive session at 7:44, no action was taken. Future. Oh, here we go. 9.0, routine business. 9.1, city manager update to report to city council on the various items that require no action, including Seabrook boards and commissions, transportation projects, and the city Seabrook CIP.
All right, Mayor and Council, no pretty pictures tonight, just really quick brief updates. There's been some questions, I think, from a couple of you on the transportation project down at Red Bluff in 146. We got a brief answer back from that contractor and the TxDOT representative. So the contractor is obviously out of town working on different portions of this project, and they're due back probably in the next month and a half to work on the overbridge. So the Red Bluff project it's coming, but they have been delayed to where they position the contractor. And then, as you probably have seen at the intersection in that area, they have the center point. So they're starting to move the station box that will eventually allow them to do the expansion of that intersection as well. So they're still, I think, at least 2 or 3 months out before they start expanding the intersection, and then the TxDOT project that will go on to Old 146, that'll expand it from 2 lanes to 4 lanes in that general area. So we're getting closer, and remember, this is another 5-year TxDOT project. So that 5-year project, and as we saw in the other project, everything's subject to change. But they, at this point, a couple months, we should see some activity back in that area. The landscaping project for TxDOT, for the beautification, the landscaping, contractor issue again, that one's, they've got the change orders for the bollards that was voted on to go back in black, so they're waiting on change order to get approved at the TxDOT level. Many of the trees that we've discussed in the past are either in a ditch or underneath high lines or power lines, so they're working out all of the change orders at this point, and they'll let us know what the new date is going to be. Transportation projects also, just to keep everybody abreast, the Toddville project that we've been talking about, that's a county project. We put out some information that the county contractor is letting us know that the surveyors, GIS, and different team members are going to be in the Toddville area doing the survey work. So we'll have more activity in the Toddville area. And Seabrook boards and commissions, not a lot of activity since your last city council meeting. We did have P&Z meet on the 30th, so there was an amendment to the PUD for the freezer warehouse that will be coming back over to you. Open space and trails, only actionable item was already heard tonight for Jesse Jones to be on the stakeholder meetings. And our CAP projects, as everybody has seen, the biggest one that we're closing the door on is the wastewater treatment plant and the final turning of the valve. So we'll be in financial closeout, but as far as mechanics, everything is substantially complete and running well, and as far as Public Works is reporting. Any questions?
Any questions?
Yeah, one, I want to say thank you to Brian's group for cleaning up the memorial. Looks great. They cleaned out all the plants and everything after the freeze. And then, Gail, you and I talked. Any news on the painting of the sails? So everybody's noticed how well it looks. The sails being painted and the logo. But then they forgot the one right across here at NASA 1 and 146 on the, if you're going south on the feeder of 146, there's a logo and 6 sails or 4 sails there they didn't do. And then between NASA 1 and the bridge, there's both sides of the road, there's sails, but they didn't paint them.
Yeah, I think what happened was that they got caught up in that rain, and then they got caught up in the rain, and then they had to stop. And I don't think they've been back, have they?
But I just wanted to know if you knew. You said you were going to contact. I just didn't know if you knew anything. So.
Yeah, no. In general, what the TxDOT rep is saying, these small contracts to come out and do that's relatively small. They have to coordinate those, so they're weeks out. They did have the rain delay, so they're probably on a scheduling, and there was no specific time that he gave me at this point.
Anything else? 9.2, establish future meeting dates and agenda items.
Mayor and council, your next scheduled city council meeting will be held on February 18th, 2025.
Move to adjourn.
All in favor? 7:50.